All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you today. What day is it? It's Friday. How could I forget? It's Friday. It's a free-for-all. And just in case you are hoping to speak to me, this is going to be your last opportunity until, and I did the math, the 23rd. So I'll be off next week and then the following Monday, 2 Mondays in a row. And the interim week, that's next week. Then I'll be back, I think it's the 23rd. No Arlen until, I think, the 29th, because Arlen is going to be traveling cross-country. He'll be in Vermont for the rest of the summer and well into the fall. So no Monday with Arlen for a couple more Mondays. You can join me at any time, 240-242-5646. I call it the free-for-all because I really hope for calls. I really want to talk to you on Fridays. We kind of replay. We go back over some of the stories that really caught my attention, or maybe yours if I see comments on the social media, whether it's at the Halitics group page on Facebook, which I hope you'll join if you haven't yet. And we have spirited conversations there. The link is in the show description on YouTube. And I hope if you haven't yet become a subscriber to the Halitics live stream, the Halitics podcast, videocast, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. Just as long as you watch, as long as you check in, do please click subscribe now. If you are a new viewer, then you don't know that I have been centering the plight of the people of Gaza since the October 7 attack by Hamas. Actually, Hamas attacked Israel, catalyzing a violent genocidal pogrom by Israel. And this is not to excuse, obviously, not to minimize or diminish what Hamas did, but that was really the excuse, the pretext that Israel has used now to really accelerate the process of eradicating the Palestinian people. And it's horrific, it's horrifying, and I center it on this program for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, because the United States government, our government, the people that we elect, have been are complicit. They're making us as a nation guilty, part of this crime against humanity that Israel is most responsible for, but we are also responsible for it. So that's a big reason. It's the most dangerous place. The killing is worse there. Life expectancy is shorter there than anywhere else on the planet right now. When I say there, that's Gaza. So that's a second reason, obviously. And a third, as a Jew, and as someone who once really did support the state of Israel and still wants there to be a true democracy on the eastern end, the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, one where all of the people who live in that region can be free, will have economic and political freedom, economic security, political justice. I still hope for that, but it's a very faint hope, and it's not a realistic one, clearly, at this time. All right, we'll start with the Al Jazeera report. A lot of times I just give you the stories. I maybe have a photo or I list the death count. But I thought, given that this is my last program for a little bit, I wanted to actually present some video. So here it is.
Hani Mahmoud joins us now from Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. So let's just begin with what's been happening in the past few hours and the strikes across the Gaza Strip.
Yes, well, Israeli air attacks continue to strike across the central area and the southern part of the Strip. In overnight attacks, we're seeing more residential buildings being targeted and destroyed. And the fact of the matter, the tragedy of this happening right now is people are not given warning whatsoever. They are being targeted inside their homes, and if they're lucky enough, they would be paying attention or realizing that they're going to be attacked and leave the area. But for the most part, people are caught in the line of fire and caught under these unpredictable falling bombs in different parts of the Gaza Strip. In eastern Khan Yunis, more residential homes being targeted, and this is not the first time. The entire city of Khan Yunis was pretty much obliterated by the Israeli military.
I'm going to just stop it there for a minute. I'm going to play the entire clip. It's another minute or so, but I just want to make a point that right now, Israel, at least according to the reporter there, this is Al Jazeera, they've proven themselves to be extremely credible, extremely reliable, nothing that they've reported. And I know Israel has banned Al Jazeera reporters now, and I believe you cannot even get Al Jazeera in Israel. If you try to log into their website, you can't access it. But not because their reporting has been proven or shown to be false or to be biased, but because they're simply telling the truth about what Israel is doing. And you can see they use the term genocide in there. Let me see if I can get that. Just so you can see it at the bottom of that little screen there. I wish it wouldn't show the YouTube thing, but what can I do? You can see that it says genocide in Gaza. And I've had this conversation when people say, well, it's not genocide. It's not like a death camp or death camps. It's not like what we saw with the Nazis. It's not people being rounded up and shot into pits. But the fact is we have found mass graves. The Palestinians, the Gazans, have uncovered mass graves at the hospital in Khan Yunis. They're the Al-Shifa hospital. People who had their arms tied behind their backs. You see the wrist where their wrists had been bitten into. The bombing of residential areas, of hospitals, the use of famine as a weapon, the extraordinarily high death count, all really do demonstrate clear intent by Israel to eradicate Gazans, to sow the fields with salt. So I think the term is fair to use. It is not a Holocaust in the way the Nazis were killing Jews, gypsies, and other, quote, undesirables, unquote. But in many ways, it is very similar in terms of the targeting of a identifiable group of people. It is similar. And we do know in other ways it is like what the Nazis did. For example, some Palestinian cemeteries have been dug up. The memory of the Palestinian people in Israel is being wiped out. It's being eliminated. So it's fair to call it a genocide, in my opinion. And our final point on this is, again, we're responsible. We are supplying the weaponry for this atrocity.
Past 4 months, when the Israeli military invaded the whole city, including the destruction of its public facilities and residential buildings and evacuation centers. Those are managed and operated by the United Nations for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, but reports of multiple injuries were transferred to Nasser Hospital. The aftermath of these attacks is the pressure that is put on Nasser Hospital that is already not operating very well. In the Nusayrat area, that's the central part of Gaza Strip, more buildings are being targeted and destroyed, reported here to Al-Aqsa Hospital.
All right, let me just stop it for again. More buildings targeted. You can see the actual death count there. That's the identifiable death count. We know the numbers are higher. On Monday this week, Arlen's questioned how could the numbers be higher. Obviously, Hamas is incentivized to identify the highest possible death count, and that's kind of a pro-Israel talking point. Well, we can't trust the numbers. The numbers are unreliable. If anything, Hamas is going to exaggerate the number of dead and injured. But in fact, what Hamas has done, what the Ministry of Health has done, the Gaza Ministry of Health, is only identify as casualties people that they actually have found, that they can locate and say, okay, this person has been shot, this person has a broken arm. But there are many people who are buried under rubble. There are people who may have died from stress, may have died from starvation, or died because they got sick because they were weak from lack of food. And those folks may or may not be part of the death count. So again, the numbers are conservative. There are 2.5 maybe million Gazans before the war started. So now you're looking at 38,000 dead. I think that's, I don't know what, 38,000 would be 3.8%. So somewhere 1-2%, somewhere around there that we know in Gaza have been killed. In the United States, that number would be 2%, would be 7 million.
A mother with her 2 children. There was also another attack where a father and 2 of his children were also killed in overnight attacks. Meanwhile, the paramedics and the civil defense crew members were able to remove 8 bodies from the different locations in Rafah city. Those were all transferred to Nasser Hospital, given that the entire Rafah city doesn't have any operational health facility whatsoever. Meanwhile, the Israeli military in Gaza pulled out.
So you can see Gaza City, Rafah, Khan Yunis. If you're a Palestinian, if you're a Gazan, there's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. You can't go to Egypt because the tunnels have been cut off there. You know, they had tunnels. Those have been cut off. The border crossing cut off by Israel because they were afraid of any arms being brought in. It's it's a death zone. And in terms of the argument, well, again, they're not putting people in Auschwitz. That entire tiny little region, you can see the map top right of the screen here that I'm presenting, just a tiny little strip. That's the death camp.
From major parts of the western Gaza city, that's including a Sabra neighborhood, the headquarters of United Nations, as well as the college university complex in the western part of the city, leaving a trail of devastation and destructions. Also, many of the bodies are still in the streets. Paramedics and civil defense crews so far collected large number, but there's still many in areas that they are unable to get to, given that the skies of Gaza are clouded with sky predators, the surveillance drones and attack drones.
Hani, thanks very much for the update. Hani Mahmoud there for us in Deir el-Balah.
All right, so an absolutely heartbreaking, devastating crime being committed by our closest ally, Israel, with our support. And, you know, I don't see how one, under these circumstances, can support Joe Biden for president. The argument is always, well, the other guy's worse. The other guy's worse. And yeah, he might actually be worse. And I certainly don't support him. He might be worse if it's possible to be worse on Israel. Maybe. But I don't think you should vote for the other guy either. The point is not to be complicit, not to be supporting this crime against humanity in any way, shape, or form. And I don't see how you're not supporting it if you don't vote for a guy who is all in, who has done nothing to stop it, who continues to supply Israel with the weapons of murder. It's not just Israel. I just put this up here. This is Ukraine. So again, deadly conflict there. And we are promoting it. The story I don't say it just came out. The New York Times reported this week, I believe, maybe it was last week, but it was in The Guardian earlier than that there were serious high-level peace negotiations in the spring of 22. And the United States and our other closest ally, right? I guess our 2 closest allies are the United Kingdom and Israel. Our other closest ally, led by its then Prime Minister Tory Boris Johnson, went to Kiev and scuttled them, stopped them, said no to Zelensky. There cannot be peace with Russia. And now we see Joe Biden, who's been salivating to get more money, right? The Republicans tried to stop it for a while, and they had that budget negotiation. Some of the Republicans, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a few others, but Mike Johnson pushed hard, and with the united support of the Democratic Party, got that money approved for more weapons, more killing, promoting endless war in Kiev. And those of you who say to me, well, Hal, what other alternative is there? We can't give in to Putin, right? That's your choices. Either give Putin Ukraine open the door for him to, roll into Europe, into Eastern Europe, or fight forever in Ukraine. I guess those are the two alternatives that some of you perceive. Well, the third alternative is the one that we are not pursuing, the one we should be pursuing, and that is peace. And we know Russia was close to signing that deal with Ukraine. Ukraine was close to signing it until Boris Johnson, at the behest of Joe Biden, I presume, right? Anthony Blinken, I don't know who, said, no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to. We don't want peace. We don't want you to engage in peace with Russia. We'd rather have tens of thousands of civilians killed. We'd rather to see Kiev and hospitals there bombed. We'd rather see the land laid waste to. We'd rather see lots of Russians killed and our weapons tested out. So we didn't make peace, and we're not making peace now. Joe Biden isn't for peace. You think it's working? Is this working? I put together this just a very, 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 very rudimentary, simple little comparison over the past year, right? Remember last summer there was the much vaunted, I remember one of my callers to my show doesn't call anymore. Very disappointed. Wish you would call, but you don't have, obviously I can't force you to, but you don't have it. So I put together this little slide just comparing the situation in Ukraine now, 30 June 24. So couple weeks ago was the line there. This is an interactive map, and I put the little, credit there to Institute for the Study of War, ISW. You can find this online if you're curious. So you can compare. Barely budged, right? I mean, this was just before that much vaunted Ukraine offensive. And again, one of my callers telling me, oh, don't be so pessimistic, Hal. It's going to work out. Russia's going to, be defeated. Our weapons are better than theirs, and we're giving them to Ukraine, and they're ready, and they're salivating for their crack at the Red Army. Well, it's not the Red Army anymore, but might as well be from our propaganda. And you can see that, if anything, pretty much the line hasn't budged. To a degree, Russia has taken more territory. It's hard to see, but there are a few little areas. You can see the black area, Crimea stays in Russian hands, which, by the way, could have become a neutral area, perhaps. It was part of the new negotiations between Russia and Ukraine in 22 that maybe Crimea becomes a demilitarized zone. It didn't. If you look at the Donbass, that's the region a little bit to the north and east, up and to the right of your screen, if I did that correctly. Hopefully it looks correct on your screen. That region, you can see there's a little more red to the left of it, and that's because Russia has moved the front somewhat to the west. Russia's actually had more military success and able to expand the region it controls in the past year. You also can see very far to the north on the map on the top, that's now versus a year ago below, around Kharkiv. Russia's had some military success as well. We are sending few $100 million more to Ukraine, so is Western Europe, and it's not going to make a difference. Experts say this is not going to change the trajectory. We're not going to see any real success. It's just going to maintain the status quo, which is probably the worst thing for the people of Ukraine. Even as bad as a Russian, quote, victory would be, Russia taking control of the area, as bad as that would be, at least the killing, the daily killing of civilians of the Ukraine troops would be over. But we're determined. But that's not the alternative. The alternative is a brokered peace deal. In 22, the peace deal could have included possibly, I'm not going to promise anything, Russia hadn't agreed, but possibly demilitarized Crimea and possibly demilitarized Donbass. Now Russia's going to say, hey, we spent 2 years slogging through this war, and we're not going to give back the territory that we recovered, or at least not all of it. So permanent war has led to much worse outcome for the Ukrainian people. This is another reason not to vote for Joe Biden, and a very important reason as well. On this issue, Trump, at least rhetorically, is better. There's one candidate who's clearly better than any of them, and that's Jill Stein. That's who I endorse. That's who I support. I'd love to talk to you, 240-242-5646. Take your calls. Remember, this is your last chance for a while. I played some Kulinski yesterday. I'm going to play him some more. Now, Biden gave a press conference yesterday, and the purpose of it, I was actually talking to a listener to this show, a friend, who said, hey, I think that press conference could be when Biden announces he's not going to run, that he's determined that, it's more important that we have a younger, more vibrant candidate, and that I would have assumed he would endorse Kamala at that point and basically hand the reins over to her. That was a possibility. That was something I was considering would happen, even though news reports were no. And Biden had been adamant he's not withdrawing. Biden had been adamant that he is going to be the candidate in November. He is the strongest to defeat Trump. Maybe he is. Polls don't say that's not true. Kyle Kulinski doesn't believe that. Oh, and by the way, no, Biden was clear, I'm running. Kulinski viewed that press conference as a disaster, which is interesting because, again, he doesn't provide us with any alternatives to let me see. We got a caller. I'll get to you in just a moment. Caller, just heard you for a sec. Just give me a moment, because Kulinski doesn't provide any alternatives. But we'll play that video after my caller. So, caller, you're on with Hal. Who is this?
Well, Hal, this is the guy that was talking to you yesterday.
Hey, how you doing, Carl? I'm gonna identify you. I think your voice is pretty distinctive. What's on your mind,
anonymous.
my friend? Okay, anonymous. Anonymous
but
caller.
I know you do, Alan. You used the word "my friend," which I rarely like to hear, but you are my friend, Hal, and that's why I want to make sure I first get my point in. I'm going to ask you, please, don't say don't vote for Biden. Please don't say that. If you want to say vote for Jill Stein, and you're free, of course, and you got your show, you got your opinion. But Hal, you might as well none of the above if you're going to vote that way, because if you know enough, I know you don't care about history. You mentioned that you are more involved in what's happening now, and that's very practical, and you actually make a good point. I don't want to go into the cliches about if you don't remember history, but I want to just tell you, I think we have a real existential threat to this country's democracy. We've got a man that says it like Hitler says it, and the people are getting have drunk the Kool-Aid, the ones that are the real hardcore, the MAGA, and you're never going to change their minds. And I'm not going to waste my time anymore arguing with them. But I sure want to ask them not to vote for Trump. Well, I don't want to go into my strategy with you now. But I just wanted to first make the point, as a friend, now I shouldn't do this. But I don't think anybody that really wants to stop Trump and recognizes that this man's, if he loses, he's not going to say he lost. And God knows how he's going to stir up the people that support him. If he wins, do you really think after 4 years that he would leave voluntarily? Anyway, he might not. Was there another vote in Germany after 1933 when the Nazis manipulated the vote and the Nazis were able to get the majority in the parliament? I mean, I don't know enough about the real fact details, but, Hitler wasn't a real popular guy, but they were able to make it happen just like, I don't want to go into the past and make comparisons, but I do want to mention the history. Hitler was able to engineer the chancellorship, and there was never another election, I don't believe.
Not until after the war. Let me just jump in for a sec, Carl. I will definitely let you. Show, I'll let you get back in a second, but just a couple thoughts. One difference between the German Weimar Constitution and what we have here is that in Germany, just like in much of Europe today, the head of state is responsible for calling elections. Now, under their constitution, they have to call them under certain circumstances. They have to call them within a certain period of time. But ultimately, elections are called by the head of state. That's what we saw in the UK recently, where I guess it was Boris Johnson decided that he had the best chance of winning and the Tories maintaining power if he called an election. He made a mistake. He lost. Same thing with Macron and his center party. He thought he might be able to maintain power if he called an election. He was wrong. He lost. It's a little different in the United States. We have elections every 4 years, period, or for president every 4 years. President doesn't get to decide if he wants to call them. Now, I agree with you. Trump is scary. There's no question. I don't dispute that. I don't think he's Hitler. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest he's a genocidal maniac. He's also a lot older than Hitler. His health isn't great. He probably will die pretty soon. I look at the current situation, and this is my final word, and I'll let you respond. I look at where we are as a nation right now. I don't think we have the luxury of electing either Trump or Biden. Things are so bad, whether it's our support for Israel and its atrocities. You don't like the word genocide, so I won't say that right now, although that's my view. It's atrocities in Gaza, our support for Russia and the proxy war in Russia, and also the climate holocaust, which is burning our planet up. I don't believe we have the luxury of continuing down the path we're going right now.
You won't say genocide, huh, Hal?
I didn't say it just now because you don't like the word, so I didn't use it to describe Israel's atrocities, Israeli atrocities.
Well, just like I shouted at you very rudely yesterday. I already wrote, and I apologized profusely. It's almost like a dirty lawyer trick to say, I'm not going to say the word genocide, particularly after you and I were talking yesterday, and then you come up with Holocaust too. And I want to make it clear.
Well, I said that with respect. The Holocaust is referring to the climate catastrophe right now. The ever hotter temperatures, 13 straight months where the temperature is 1.5 plus degrees Celsius over pre-industrial temperatures.
I guess you don't realize that the word Holocaust is often used in the term another term for the genocide and Shoah, and it's
apocalyptic, right? It refers to mass killing, mass death, which is exactly what we're doing right now because of our continued support for the fossil fuel industry.
You asked me in the beginning, how's my health? I really want to keep my mental health. I'm a Jew, a Jewish guy by birth. My birth assignment was Jewish. I was brought up bar mitzvah. That's about as personal as I want to get. Although I had a friend who used to say he remembered his bris. And what do they do that at 10 days? That's a pretty good memory.
8.
But,
it's after 8.
Okay, well, you know more than I do, Hal, because I
didn't have my children circumcised. I was adamant. Before we even procreated, before my wife and I even decided to have children, I discussed with her my strong opposition to circumcision and how if we had boys, I did not want them to be circumcised. And, we had that conversation beforehand and we agreed that our children would not be circumcised.
I hear you. Okay, I think they might even call that TMI, but I'm not going to say anything because I had 2 daughters, and anyway. There still is, vive la différence, even though I love, people that are real. I love people that are real, like Marie, if you remember the person that really made a major contribution on your station when you were running KRXA.
Rest
and
in
worked
peace.
as hard as you did.
Rest in peace,
Marie was one of the most, a person that taught me more about life. She was an absolute, you really were gifted. We were with her, but she was one son of a gun. And I can imagine, when she had the most deadly stare down that I've ever seen. I want to get back to the parliamentary system that you were talking about, and which I prefer, I think, in a way, if I was going to make the plans. But, let's get back to what's on the ground, like you like to, and that is we have a bicameral democracy, I think. And it is Democrats and Republicans, and it's been that way since the Republic was founded. Well, there were Whigs, right? And I hope the Republicans go the way of the Whigs. I'd really like to see that. They've earned it. And then next came the Republicans, because the Democratic Party, I mean, I don't know if they're Democrat. Let's not go down the history low. But the fact is, this country is bicameral every 4 years, not like in Germany, like you mentioned. And Hitler didn't become, stay in power just because he didn't call elections. Or I don't even know who the president was. He was a lackey to Hitler for sure, because he got rid of Van Hindenburg. Wasn't it Hindenburg was the president in all those years of the Weimar Republic? He was
he died
man,
shortly after. Hindenburg, he was the last, I guess, president. He made Hitler chancellor, but Hindenburg was only president for a short time. I think there were a number of others. I could be wrong. My history could be off there. I just want to correct one more point. I just want to correct something you said. Not that I think you maybe misunderstood something I said, but I also gave you a final word, and then I got to let you go, Carl. I don't think we shouldn't study history. I think history is really, really important. What I mean when I say, sometimes I'm not really going to focus on history is when we're looking at something like what's happening in Gaza today, when we're looking at what's happening in Ukraine today, I'm less interested in the causes than in stopping the killing. We should examine the causes. We need to address, figure out what kind of injustices lead to these types of human, tragedies. But I don't want to get into pointing fingers and saying, well, it's the Palestinians' fault, it's the Jews' fault, it's the Israelis' fault, because I just want the killing to stop right now. Then we can go back and look at the history and say, well, what could we do differently? But right now, it seems the most important thing is to stop the humanitarian tragedy.
If you made the time to watch the press conference last night, you would have seen that the most adamant caller for, my language is not so good, but Biden is the most vigorous pursuer of peace. He made a proposal. It's on the table. He talks peace. He talks peace. He talks peace. But he's been a supporter of the state of Israel. And I want to say goodbye, Hal. Please don't tell people not to vote for him. Just say vote for Joe Stein if you want. But then maybe that's none of my business. I apologize for crossing boundaries if I did, and have a great day. And I never got to the fact of the soccer. I wanted to find out about you going out there and eating brötchen and all that. It must have been fun.
I had a great time, Carl. Thanks for asking. Really did like Germany. And I mentioned on this program before, by the way, I'll let Carl go at this point. Thanks so much. It was great to hear from Carl. And you're never crossing any lines, Carl, when you say, don't say this, don't say that. It's just, I may not do what you want me to do. I do what I do. And then either you like it or you don't. Either you listen or you don't. Either call in and criticize me or you don't. Yeah, Germany was really nice. I will, look, I think Biden, maybe he really does want peace. I don't know, but he doesn't act. His policies don't promote peace. So it's hollow, right? It doesn't mean any. Rhetoric is nice, but only when it's followed by consistent action. All right, here's Kalinsky talking about yesterday's press conference by Biden. And I don't think, by the way, he really hits the most important news yesterday when it comes to Joe Biden was what I showed you earlier, the announcement of more arms for Ukraine, right? Perpetuating endless war. But let's play this clip because it's pretty interesting what he has to say.
All right, y'all. So we just had the Biden press conference. And long story short, homie is cooked. He is mega cooked. He is barbecued, deep fried, broiled, boiled. Any word you can come up with that denotes some form of cooking, he was put in the waffle iron and the toaster and 74 other, the convection oven, the air fryer, every kind of thing you could think of that could cook something. That's what happened. Okay, so
obviously Kulinski's saying, I mean, he's saying that's it. Biden's done. There's no way he's not going to be elected. That's what he's saying. And presumably, although he doesn't say this, and I think you can kind of glean it, but I don't know if he really is saying it, they're going to pick, the Dems are going to pick someone else, even though Biden's adamant that he's the runner. He's running. But Kulinski couldn't be more confident that Biden has lost. And to me, if you're going to say that, aren't you going to then say this is who should be the nominee? This is who the Democrats should run? Or do what I do, which is say, vote for somebody else. Vote for Jill Stein. But for whatever reason, this guy who Jill Stein says endorse her won't do that. And I don't understand. I went through the whole clip, the whole transcript. He doesn't use the word Stein. He doesn't use the word Newsom. He doesn't use the word Whitmer. He mentions Kamala Harris, but not in context of someone who should be the nominee for the Democratic Party. Let's play a little more of this.
Oh, now this was viewed as a last-ditch effort for him to sort of save himself from the bad press, everything everybody's been saying post-debate, to save himself from all the Democrats who are jumping ship, and he failed the test miserably. So first of all, before I get to the actual Q&A, earlier today, there was the first Democratic congressperson to come out and say, not only should Biden stop running, he should also resign as president. Oh!
All right, so I stopped it there. I didn't get to the point where he goes over, where Kulinski goes over what Biden said and where he's really messed up. But apparently he called Trump Vice President Trump, and he got confused between Trump and Harris and all that. Yeah, it's not good, right? I mean, but this is what I do think Joe Biden is not likely to win. I don't think he's going to withdraw. It just doesn't seem. Maybe he will. Maybe there'll be some sort of pressure. Maybe they'll use some sort of constitutional, solution. And the 25th Amendment, I think if the president can't serve, he can be pulled. I'm not really sure. The two dissidents, boys, I mentioned them too yesterday. Again, they're totally anti-Biden, unlike Kulinski, who actually did endorse Biden. I think still supports Biden, he doesn't support an alternative. Due Dissidents has been totally against Biden from the beginning, and they provide these, examples. So I want to just give you the screenshot, which follows up on what Kulinski was saying, which is that the Democratic Party has abandoned Joe Biden. Richie Torres, centrist Congress member who's all in for Israel, huge Zionist, says Dems must assess hard numbers. They must say, hey, look, he can't win. Connecticut Senator Blumenthal says he's deeply concerned. And this is what's really interesting. The new polling does indicate Dems are losing ground in key swing states. That is true. That is a fact. I've noticed that. And not just Biden is losing ground or has lost ground in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, but also congressional Dems are struggling. And I think that's the bigger picture. That's the bigger factor. But again, Biden, unless they're going to actually invoke some sort of constitutional amendment that provides for replacing president when he's, no longer fit, which I don't think is going to happen. The numbers aren't bad. This is what is kind of astounding to me. For all the talk that Biden can't win, that Biden's cooked, look at these numbers. This is today. I showed you a poll yesterday from the Washington Post saying it's a dead heat. According to NPR, PBS, Merits, and again, these are decent polls. These are credible. I mean, when I say decent, they're not crap polls. They're not they're not fly-by-night operations. Biden +2. Trump only +1 when everyone's in. And Trump's getting 43%. Harris beats Trump. Newsom beats Trump. Whitmer's tied with Trump. Biden's ahead. So again, I don't why all the pearl clutching and hand wringing about Joe Biden? Now, I don't think you should support Joe Biden because his policies suck. Because we can't afford it. We don't have the luxury of reelecting Biden, given the scope of the problems we face. We don't have that luxury. But if your concern is just we have to beat Trump, I don't know that the numbers really prove Biden needs to drop out. And I note that 538 says, hey, it's a dead heat. It's a toss-up. We crunch all the numbers, we look at all the polls. It's a dead heat. There is so much fear and trepidation around Donald Trump that even with Demented Joe running, it's not clear that Trump will win. Moreover, the alternatives aren't much better than Demented Joe. They don't have appeal to the working class. They do turn off large constituencies. I do not believe Kamala Harris would be a stronger candidate in the Midwest. I think, if anything, she might be a weaker candidate in the Midwest than Demented Genocide Joe. And maybe Whitmer, but she's not well known. I think she would, her one advantage you have, I guess, is geographical. I don't know that she's popular in Michigan. California liberal Newsom with the slick back hair, is he really going to appeal to the heartland? I don't think so. So all the fear and trepidation and pearl clutching, I don't know if it's worth it, really, if you're a Democrat. All right, I have been really irritated, annoyed that these progressive hosts, or quasi-progressive or putatively progressive like Kalinsky, and the due dissidence bros really are progressive, but I'm really annoyed that they don't talk about alternatives. Here we'll have a conversation. This is my favorite, right? Brianna Joy Gray on the left. You can see her there, along with Jim Zogby, who there's two Zogbys. I know they're brothers. Maybe the one who was the pollster's dad, or am I wrong about that? I don't know. I get them confused. Anyway, Jim Zogby, Arab American, he's going to talk about the election with Brianna Joy Gray. So let me play some of that. And they will mention Jill Stein's name. So here we go.
On that issue, it wouldn't solve the issue.
In a good way?
Well, here's the question. Do I expect Cornel West to win the election? Do I expect Bobby Kennedy's position on this actually is worse than Biden?
I agree, 100%.
And
right, let me stop it there for just one sec. Yes, Bobby Kennedy's awful. I'm really glad that Zogby just kiboshed any even contemplation on this program that RFK Jr., because he's not a Democrat or a Republican, or at least running as an independent. Remember, because that's what Kim Iverson said. Well, we have to defeat the duopoly. Anything's better than the duopoly. No, not if they're a pro-billionaire, pro-genocide candidate. They're not better. They're just as bad.
And so, and Jill Stein might have a good position, but 4% of the vote.
Now he says that, so does she might have a good position. No, she has a really good position. She's the only one who has a good position.
It's not going to make a difference here. I mean,
he says not going to make a difference. Well, see, this is where I get so frustrated. I start pulling my hair out. Jim Zogby, you have a voice. You have some influence. You have some power. Brianna Joy Gray has a little more, maybe. Why don't you say how important it is that people rally behind Jill Stein? He won't do that. But he does, at least he pays lip service to the idea.
Little bit of, I think, seeing the landscape and what is possible, politics being the art of the possible, is what I think we have to focus on. Now, I think that you're right that Kamala Harris has not just been softer, but I think she actually gets it better.
So this is where Zogby completely goes off the rails. Earlier in the interview, what Zogby's referring to is when Brianna Joy Gray mentioned that rhetorically Harris is a little less bellicose, a little more empathic seeming towards the Palestinian people, the victims of the Israeli atrocities and of our support for them. And Zogby, as an Arab American, has some identity affiliations with the Palestinians. You think he would be pretty pro, I would say, Jill Stein, because she's the only candidate who's calling out what Israel's doing for what it is. But instead, Zogby, he's a loyal Democrat. Yeah, he's kind of progressive. He's a loyal Democrat. He's just simply not going to. His loyalty to this party trumps his tribal loyalty, you would think, his affinity with the people who are being massacred. Now, he's not Palestinian. Is he Syrian? I'm not even sure. Maybe Lebanese. I'm not really sure. But it's pretty close. It's pretty close, right? Nope. I'm all in for Kamala.
I've had a conversation with her about it. I've seen things she's gone out to say. I know that the White House has constrained her and said, you cannot say that, you need to say this.
So this is all the arguments we hear for her. Well, I've talked to her. I think she really cares. Come on. Jim Zogby, she knows you have a little bit of an influence. Of course she's going to come out with a tear in her eye for the poor Palestinian people. Why do you fall for it? Why would you be so... What kind of a chump are you? And you know what my answer is? He's not a chump. He knows it's BS. He's trying to make chumps of us. Oh, she really does care because he has a little bit of insider status, a little bit. He said, I've talked to her, right? Who else? Who here has talked? Who of you have talked to the vice president? He wants to maintain that status, right? So he's never going to turn fully against the Democratic Party. It's not trustworthy. But this is the propaganda they feed you. This is the Hasbara they feed you.
Instead, and I have a feeling she'd be better on the issue.
I have a feeling. I'll never forget Robert Reich saying, I think Hillary Clinton will be a great president. I'll never forget him saying that in 2016 after having spent all those years in the Clinton White House, seeing exactly what a horrible person she is, how she was consistently championing the rights of the corporations and constantly, bending her knee to wealth and power after, her abortive healthcare plan was crushed. And yet Robert Reich says, oh, she'd be a great president. Zero evidence. Oh, I believe, says Zogby, she gets it. Come on. How stupid do you think we are?
Would she or the political establishment in the Democratic or Republican Party be willing to say, Bibi Netanyahu or whoever replaces him, if you do this, we're cutting the aid, we're stopping the flow, we're not going to support you at the UN, we're not going to punish the International Criminal Court? No, we're not there yet. We're still.
Right, so he just admits it. Yeah, she gets it, but she's not going to draw a line. She's not going to say no. So again, what's the point of voting for her? If you're supporting her, Zogby, I would assume it's because you believe she would make a difference. And you just said she wouldn't. You just said she won't. She's not going to say no to Bibi. She's not going to stop the flow of arms. So how can you possibly be for her? Why aren't you for Jill? Oh, 4%. Well, use your power. Use your influence. 4% now, 6% tomorrow. 8%, maybe 10% on election day. Green Party has some real momentum going into the next election cycle. Democratic Party sees that it can't win using its current policies, promoting its current anti-people, anti-environment, pro-war, pro-corporate policies won't fly anymore. By the way, Carl made an interesting point. I want to just go. He was saying he hopes that the Republicans go the way of the Whigs. Actually, the party that would be possibly the one that would go the way of the Whigs. The Whig Party was broken apart by its support by slavery. There was there was an abolitionist faction in the North and a pro-slavery faction in the South. And that ultimately broke the party up, and the abolitionists became Republicans and the pro-slavery faction became Democrats. They joined the Democratic Party. That will not happen in the Republican Party, but it could happen in the Democratic Party if remember what AOC said? In another world, Joe Biden and I wouldn't even be in the same party. So if you had a true progressive flank that drew the line and said, we're not going to support war, we're not going to do this, we're not going to support corporations, we're not going to support offshoring, we're not going to support the climate holocaust, we're done with it, then you could see the Democratic Party splinter. Bernie could have maybe brought that to bear in 2016, maybe. It would have been great to see. And that's what we need. We need the Green Party to supplant it.
Building the movement, we have to elect more members of Congress. We never should have let Jamal Bowman down. We need to defend.
So Zogby's argument here is, well, we can't expect Kamala to stand up to Bibi because of the way the Democratic Party is. No, we have more work to do. He says, okay, so he ignores the fact, he kind of alludes to it, well, we have more work to do, we shouldn't have let Bowman down. No, the Democratic electorate in Westchester voted for Latimer. It wasn't that we let Bowman down, it's that Bowman was in a district where most Democrats, pro-Israel, Zionists, listen to AIPAC. And also because Bowman wasn't really a pro-worker, pro-poor, pro-struggling candidate. He just wasn't. He was just a kind of a standard issue, somewhat to the left Democrat. That's it. But if your argument's obvious, oh yeah, we have to do more organizing, you're out of your friggin' mind. The Democratic Party is moving hard right. How can you possibly say with a straight face that you think, oh, we can defend AOC and we can defend Ayanna Pressley and everything will be hunky-dory? You're out of your friggin' mind.
Free Bush. We need to make sure that Ilhan and Rashida and Delia and Ayanna and AOC are back in, and we have to grow those numbers. We have to defeat AIPAC and win pro-Palestinian and pro-peace candidates in order.
All right, so I'm done with that. That's not gonna. You can say it. We have to. If you want to do that, then here's what you do: you support the Green Party. You support the one pro-Palestine candidate running. You don't endorse Kamala Harris, who, and I showed this yesterday, screened Sheryl Sandberg's bogus, debunked documentary that centers non-victims of Hamas violence. There were victims. Yes, what Hamas did was really, really awful. But you know what? They didn't commit a bunch of rapes on October 7th, and that's only being presented to you over and over and over again, despite the fact that we know it's not true, because it activates that little reptilian place in our brain. Oh no, those Palestinians, those dark-skinned people are ravaging these poor Europeans, these white Europeans. That's kind of what they're trying, the imagery they want to scare you with. For whatever reason, just knowing that 1,100 or so people were slaughtered by Hamas doesn't do it. And you know why it doesn't? Because Israel's killing more than that, killing many, many, many more people than that. If we're only talking about human lives, then Israel loses. Israel's a far more efficient, far more bloodthirsty killer than Hamas. So you have to come up with something else. So you make up a story about sexualized violence, and Kamala Harris promotes that story. And yet that's who Jim Zogby, Arab American, calls for to be president, because he's a Democratic insider. The Democratic Party, you want to address the existential crises that we face, we've got to move in a different direction. Now, you know who kind of sort of gets it? The Democratic Socialists of America. Look at this. Kind of was amazed by this. They, the national, the political, it's so complicated. I mean, they make themselves out to be so special. But hey, to their credit, they rescinded what they call the conditional endorsement of AOC. And I even give them credit for only giving her a conditional endorsement. It's funny because didn't Zogby just say we've got to have her back? And yet DSA recognizing that she doesn't have the back of the Palestinian people. She doesn't have the back of the American people. So they revoked or rescinded this conditional endorsement. The conditions were that they would endorse her conditionally so long as she opposes funding to Israel. They have this participation in the DSA activities, which I don't think she ever has since she was elected. She's really been very kind of moved away from that group, DSA. Although she did address them once and was very controversial. A lot of criticism of her internally was not allowed to be aired at their public meeting. She has to oppose criminalizing anti-Zionism, and she has to publicly support BDS. So those were their conditions. I don't know that she really violated those since that endorsement came out, but for other reasons, they said, nope, we're done. Let me see what that. So here's the actual statement. We are withdrawing our conditional endorsement because we have not seen that she maintained those conditions. But then they are much more explicit about what she did that they don't like. And I want to get into this just a little bit more because I think it's very, very important for us as progressives to see how at least one group that in some ways is progressive and certainly calls itself progressive, the DSA, has had enough with the triangulation, with the gaslighting by AOC, and I appreciate that. I really do. And they note that she voted in favor of this House resolution, which said, yeah, Israel, if you challenge Israel's right to exist, that's anti-Semitic. Obviously, it's not. Very bad that she did vote that way. She did support, she voted not present when there was a vote back in 21 for the Iron Dome, but then she later on said she supports it. Totally wrong, totally misguided. You know, Israel, part of the reason Israel does all the killing in the West Bank and in Gaza is because most of the missiles, nearly all of the missiles that are launched at it, are intercepted by the Iron Dome. There's no real deterrence. There was some deterrent factor if they were afraid, hey, if we keep killing Gazans and if we keep killing Palestinians on the West Bank, then hey, we could put our own people at risk. But they don't have that fear. And AOC is part of the reason for that. And this is the big factor, I believe. This is what really did. And I highlighted this. Remember she had that little town hall or whatever it was with those two Zionists? And they were totally resistant, the two women, to any effort by AOC to at least have them take on Israeli violence or to at least acknowledge the pain that Israel is causing. They, in general terms, oh, we hate to see this, but they were unwilling at any point to acknowledge that Israel is responsible. Nor would they bite when AOC said, well, I understand you don't like it, certain criticisms of Israel. What are better ways? How can we talk about these issues without being anti-Semitic? She accepted their claim that criticism of Israel is often correctly seen as anti-Semitic. We have to avoid the appearance of anti-Semitism when we criticize Israel. AOC bought into all of that, which was a load of crap. She bought into it. But when she tried to get them to say what critics of Israel can do, how critics of Israel can challenge Israel without being accused of anti-Semitism, they wouldn't. They gave her nothing. Nothing. So, fair enough, DSA says her sponsorship of that affair was a deep betrayal. Absolutely, it was absolutely a betrayal. So good for you. Good for you, DSA. As far as it goes, I'm glad you rescinded your endorsement. But the real reason they should have is not listed. The real reasons they should have rescinded any and shouldn't have even considered it isn't those kind of that rhetorical issue. Well, she entertained the Zionists. She's never, as far as I know, she's never had a conversation with Palestinian activists. And that's terrible. I mean, those are reasons you should rescind the order. I don't know. But her rhetoric isn't always awful. For example, she did say Israel is committing genocidal acts, I think is how she described it, or it's genocide, something like that. I don't think she said Israel was genocidal, but she said something about there was genocide in Gaza, kind of a more past tense, right? An inactive tense, passive voice. There's genocide in Gaza, not saying who's committing it. But okay, she used the term. I'm okay with that. The reason you should not have ever even considered, even possibly endorsing AOC, DSA, the biggest reason DSA shouldn't have endorsed AOC is because she supports Democratic leaders. Perhaps the most important vote of all was back in 22 when they replaced Nancy Pelosi as House Leader of the Democrats. Democrats unanimously approved Jeffries, the representative from Wall Street, the pro-military representative, the pro-Israel representative. He's taken members to Israel. She didn't raise her voice. No, she said, yep, good for him. We want him. The House Democratic leader is incredibly powerful. They decide the agenda. They decide who the committee chairs are. It's incredibly important. I understand she couldn't have stopped Jeffries, but there could have been a loud, raucous fight over him being the chair. This corrupt New Yorker. There could have been a real house fight. But she just went right along with it, as did every other squad member. There's no excuse for that. I got into it with a Maryland Democrat when she said to me, or I didn't want to give away the gender, but I did. She said, I don't know why you're making such a big deal. You've got to go along with the leadership. You can't make enemies of the leadership. I'm like, leader, they're not your friend. They don't do anything for you. The issues that matter are going to be completely sidelined by this leader. And in fact, he'll push legislation that's really bad, like arms for Ukraine, like an endless supply of weapons for Israel. What we do care about, Medicare for all, not going to be on the table. So, of course, this is where you draw a line in the sand, Of course it is. She didn't do it. And I'll tell you another terrible reason for this. Assuming Democrats get their majority back at some point, how are you going to get rid of Jeffries? You already voted for him. Are you going to do a force the vote, which is what they should have done with Pelosi? Let's say the Democrats have 220 and the Republicans have, 218? Is that right? 438? Yeah. Are you going to do a force the vote? You're going to say, hey, we'll only vote for you, Hakeem, if you agree to this and you agree to that and you agree to the other thing? Maybe, but I'd be shocked. So that's why she doesn't deserve their endorsement, because she supported Hakeem Jeffries. She didn't raise one dissenting voice. She didn't push for one dissenting voice against Hakeem Jeffries to be the House leader. And here's the other reason that they should never have endorsed or even considered it. She's all in for Biden. And I believe it, DSA says what really matters to us is we stop the genocide in Israel, the genocide by Israel in Palestine, then how could you ever support a candidate for re-election, AOC, who's a surrogate for that enabler of genocide, for that supporter? You can't do it. She deserved no support she deserves no support on the left. She just doesn't. It's just that simple. What progressives who do get elected have to understand is that you will not get reelected. We will not have your back unless you vote the way we want, unless you do what you should do, unless you stand against power. Raw, naked, violent power. Unless you do that, you're dead to us. And I'm glad DSA kind of, sort of sent that message. All right, I was so hoping I was going to talk about the social media question of, what artists or you wish they were different than they are and you could support them, but I'm not going to get to it. So too bad. I do have one more story I've got to talk about, and then we'll get to the, usual endorsement. Surprise, I've already endorsed her a million times on this program, but I'll say it again. This is the other, endless war and the climate catastrophe, the climate holocaust, they go hand in hand. The former greatly exacerbates the latter, and the latter, meaning the climate holocaust, makes war more likely. Fights over water, right, become more and more likely. It's getting worse and worse. This is the first time ever 1.5 degrees C over an entire year, every month hotter than the last. And I think people don't, I think it's so bad, it's so terrifying that we've kind of given up on it. We're just like, well, there's nothing we can do. I really think that's where we are. I've got a video here. I want to play it because not everyone believes me. Not everyone thinks I know what I'm talking about. You may look at sources and think they're not all reliable. So let's go to what I think is a pretty, generally considered a pretty, I'll just mute that a little bit, generally a pretty centrist source, right? The Weather Channel. And, I'll just give you the little captions there. Let's get that music up again. We're at a tipping point for ever more extreme global warming. Get rid of me so you don't see me there either. Worldwide, June 2024 was the hottest ever. In Europe, the second hottest heat dome, over 100 degrees in Canada. US, second hottest June on record. So just an absolute nightmare. We're destroying our mother. We're burning her up. There's only one candidate that we can have any confidence will fight to preserve what's left. And what can I tell you? I say I hope you vote for her. I'm not saying she'll win. I'm not stupid. I'm not delusional. But I don't know what other option we have, given the seriousness, given where we are, given this, how bad things are right now. We just don't have the luxury of indulging our hatred of Donald Trump. We just don't have it. So please don't vote for Stein. Vote for something a little bit better. Maybe, hopefully, a lot better than what we have now. We don't have that luxury of indulging our fears that are stoked by corporate media, stoked by elites. We don't have it. The time has passed for that. It's now time to look at policy and say whose policies really can make things better.
Of many, many years, I've learned many, many things from her. She's brilliant, she's dedicated, she's been viciously smeared and lied about. She had the kindness to once ask me if I'd like to be vice president, and I didn't want to be, but she, yeah, of course, if you want to vote for someone, nobody should vote for Trump or Biden, my God. But if you want to vote for somebody good, she's somebody good. But you know, I mean, I could take one of these books and throw it, and I would hit somebody 1,000 times better than Trump or Biden. It's not a high bar. The only other thing I want to say.
All right, so I'll stop it there. And, you know, he kind of pulls the punch a little bit there by saying, well, I could throw a book and hit somebody who's better than Trump or Biden. And it's true, but it's kind of like a little bit saying, yeah, maybe, you know, okay, vote for Stein, but not, hey, this is a really good choice. No, she really is a good choice. Is she perfect? Absolutely not. But she's better by far than anyone else in the race. And again, I'll finish with this. We don't have the luxury of voting for or voting against somebody we don't like. We have to vote for somebody who will make things better because they're that bad, because things are that awful for so many. You can't just indulge your own fears, right? There has to be something more. There has to be a vision for something a little bit more, for something sustainable, something that will mean a better world. We just aren't in a position now anymore to not do that. All right, that's going to do it for me. I'll be back in 6 business days, 8, 9, something like that, 10 days, something like that. I'll be back. Enjoy your weekend. Go England.